right now I'm recording this video on a camera called the Sony a6400. Now, legally, this is classified as a camcorder, and in order to buy this, I had to spend about $200 more than I would have spent on the competing camera that is not a camcorder. Now, I don't care that I had to spend $200 more on this camera because I'm rich, but some people might care about that. So why in the world, number one, does this camcorder cost more? And number two, why did I decide to buy it instead?
First, I'd like to tell you about today's sponsor, I Trust Capital. Today, people are concerned about the purchasing power of their dollars being eroded due to inflation. They're concerned about the returns they're getting on their traditional portfolios, things like stocks and bonds. Many people want to be able to purchase investments that will preserve their purchasing power, things like gold, silver, Bitcoin, ways to store the value of your money without being exposed to the dollar. What's the problem with this? The problem is that most people have most of their wealth in their 401ks, their employer's retirement accounts. And these accounts do not allow people to buy gold, silver, or Bitcoin. Some of them allow access to ETFs that have exposure to these prices. But number one, you're introducing many layers of counterparty risk. And number two, you don't actually own the asset itself. That's where I Trust Capital comes in. I Trust Capital allows you to open up actual retirement accounts, IRAs, traditional and Roth. You can even roll over funds from a previous employer's retirement account to fund this. You can buy gold, you can buy silver, you can buy Bitcoin and even other cryptocurrencies with I Trust Capital. And if you sign up with my link in the description below, you'll get $100 worth of Bitcoin as a sign-up bonus for opening the account.
This is an example of the invisible hand of government, the invisible consequences or cost or burden that the government imposes on society with regulations, laws, and taxes. So before I answer the question about my camera and camcorder specifically, I need to give two different examples of this. I'm sure at the last big get-together, party, family and friends hanging out that you were at, you saw some sort of hard seltzer there. Hard seltzers have gotten very popular lately. We've got White Claws, we've got Trulies, you've got Topo Chicos, and plenty of others as well. But when you drink these, one thing you'll notice is that they just taste a little off, especially if you taste them side by side with a hard seltzer that you make yourself by mixing bubbly water and vodka. Now, there's another brand that you might have heard of before. It's called High Noon. And these, number one, cost more, but number two, they taste a lot more like it when you make it yourself. So what's the difference? And why do they taste so much better? And why do they cost more? Well, because a malt beverage is legally classified as a beer. And so for importing purposes, they fall under a lower tariff. It is cheaper for companies to make malt beverages. When you mix hard liquor and bubbly water in order to make your hard seltzer and you try and sell that, you have to classify that as liquor. And so it costs more to import that. The tariffs are higher. Both of them are going to have the same amount of alcohol in the can, but because you made them differently, one of them has a higher tariff rate. This leaves all party goers who are enjoying a hard seltzer the burden of having to suffer through either paying more for the one that tastes better or paying the regular amount for something that tastes subpar. Now, I get it. For most people, this seems completely inconsequential, but you'll start to notice a pattern of these kind of things happening all over the place. Take, for example, the shoes Vans. On some of the bottoms of Vans soles, you'll notice when you buy them, they have felt on the bottom. So why in the world would a shoe company ever cover the bottoms of their shoes in felt, a material that is not durable and looks like just a waste of a product and looks like just a waste of material? Well, just like before, there is a tax reason, a tariff reason. If the bottom of the shoe is covered in a certain percentage of felt, it is legally classified as a slipper, not a shoe. And guess what slippers have that shoes don't? That's right, a lower tariff rate on imports. And so in order to get their shoes to qualify as the lower tariff option, they're covering the bottoms of their shoes with felt so that they legally qualify as a slipper. Now, the end result of this is, number one, people have to pay more for other products as a result of a misallocation of resources. There is felt and glue, materials, resources that should be going to other things, should be made available to other things, and they would be at a lower cost, but because they're being diverted artificially to Vans shoes in order to just rub off on the bottom of them, the first 10, 20 steps you take outside on the concrete and completely wasted, we are left paying higher prices across the board for those things, and there are real losers as a result. Now, what about the camcorder and camera that I mentioned earlier? Like I said, these cameras that I record on are considered camcorders. Now, the distinction there is how long they can record for. Typically, when I record a video, the actual recording will be 30 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes long. That's right, I make a lot of mistakes and I take a lot of breaks in between my recording, but my editing team is great at cutting all of that out. And so when I make these videos, I need the camera to be able to record for longer than 30 minutes at a time. But on a standard camera, you get a regular photography style camera, the recording limit is artificially limited at 30 minutes. You try and record a video for longer than 30 minutes and it will shut off recording. As you can imagine, this would be pretty frustrating if you're trying to record a video that's longer than 30 minutes. In order to get around that, you have to buy something classified as a camcorder, and they're always gonna cost $50 to $200 more than their camera counterpart. And no, that's not because it costs more to make a camcorder. As you might suspect, this is a software limitation artificially imposed on the hardware so that the hardware will stop recording at 30 minutes. The reason is because camcorders are taxed at a higher rate than cameras are. And so in order to be able to qualify as a camera companies have to artificially impose a recording limit of 30 minutes, leaving people like me footing the bill or leaving everybody else footing the bill of a 30-minute recording limit. Now, obviously, all of these examples in their own situations seem relatively minor, that there aren't that many ramifications as a result of some people having to pay a little bit more for some things. But this is just 3 examples. These things are absolutely everywhere, and they do make real winners, like sometimes it's the federal government by getting extra income, but sometimes they make real losers, meaning everybody on net is a little bit worse off as a result of money being diverted where it shouldn't need to be diverted to. And this gets to the fundamental law of laws, that they change human behavior. Left to their own devices, if humans are able to freely choose their course of actions, humans are going to choose the things that make them profit the most. So what does profit mean? Because we have to define that. Profit simply means becoming better off. So it is a subjective thing. When you go and buy a hamburger, you profit because you got something you wanted more than something you gave up. You wanted that hamburger more than you wanted the $5. It's not that that $5 was worth less, like objectively, than the burger. Otherwise, you wouldn't have given up the $5. It was that that burger was worth more to you than that $5. No more, no less. And that's how humans go about choosing their actions. You're going to maximize your profit, choosing the course of actions that will make you the most better off as possible. So as you go throughout your day, your week, your life, you're going to rank all the potential actions you could take. You're going to take the actions that will make you most better off. Now, it's important to recognize that the point of a law is to change human behavior. That's why there's no law about people have to sleep at least 2 hours or 3 hours a night, because everybody does that. In fact, most people sleep a lot more than that. And so there'd be no point, and nobody would ever pass a law mandating something that people already do. The express purpose, the only point of a law, is to change human behavior. And because human behavior is always ranked in order of the thing that will make me most better off, and then if I can't do that, then I'll do the thing that makes me better off after that, and then after that. That means that by laws and regulations changing human behavior, you are enforcing human action to take a course of action that is less profitable than they would have otherwise chosen. I was recently at lunch with my friend Keith Weiner, CEO of Monetary Metals, and he was talking about an example of this with milk. When you measure the cost of what it takes to create milk versus 30, 40 years ago, we get more milk per cow today than we used to. We get more cows per acre than we used to. We get more cows and milk per gallon of water and amount of food, and the amount of milk we can produce has a much lower cost in terms of the resources necessary than it used to, upwards of 90% cheaper in terms of the resources. But milk hasn't gone down 90% in cost. In fact, the price of milk for decades has been roughly the same. This is an example of a hidden burden, consequence, cost that the government enforces on people through devaluing the money. We know that the government takes money through taxes and tariffs through the examples that we've already discussed, and those influence changes in human behavior that leave people worse off. But government also imposes a cost on society through inflation. Instead of just taking all the money they need from taxes, they take some of it through printing it. And that newly printed money has purchasing power as a result of taking it from all the existing money. We saw this most clearly when they printed $3 trillion in 2020 and 2021. The cost of all that government spending showed up in higher prices. And so while the cost of creating milk, when you measure it in terms of the resources necessary, has gone down, we haven't been able to experience the benefit of cheaper milk because the government's been taking all of that extra purchasing power through inflation for decades. And as a final example, we're going to look at the affordable housing crisis. Through laws, regulations, and zoning rules, the government has been waging a war on affordable housing. It's no secret that the price of something is a function of the supply of that thing and the demand for that thing. And so if we want more affordable housing, we don't need to specifically make more housing that is affordable. All we need is a larger quantity of housing, and that will drive the prices down. It's also true that you could make a very small starter single-family home with a couple bedrooms, very simple, profitably, if there were no laws, taxes, and regulations. It's not that expensive to build a small house. But because of zoning laws, because of taxes, because of regulations, it is no longer profitable for builders to build small homes, which is why you don't see the 800 to 1200 square foot houses being built anymore anywhere. You see the larger homes that are not entry-level homes being built. This is pricing many people out of ever being able to break into homeownership because there's an artificial cost imposed on homes through laws, taxes, zoning rules, regulations, etc., making the cost of all housing higher through the lack of supply. And one bonus example, really close friend of mine once started a coffee shop, and in opening this small coffee shop, they had every single regulator and inspector from the city and the county and the state and the federal and everybody coming in saying, hey, did you check all these boxes? Did you make sure you did this? Did you make sure you did that? And every single time one of these people came in, they would look and say, this was not part of the list that the last person told us about. And one time it had something to do with drains, the size of the drain versus the square footage and the placement of the drain versus other drains in the back kitchen area. And it conflicted with it was the federal and the state level, their regulations conflicted with each other. And so in order to comply with one, you couldn't be complying with the other. So the fact is that there are hundreds and thousands of laws and regulations and rules that hinder small businesses from being able to come into the industry and compete with the big boys. Do you think Starbucks has this issue with small little time inspectors coming in and complaining about the size or the placement of drains? No, Starbucks is probably one that lobbied to get those laws passed in the first place to make it more confusing and more difficult for the little guy to start up and compete, which shows that there are always winners and losers. And usually the winners are the people who had the incentive to get that law or that regulation passed in the first place. The winners for zoning laws are the people who already have the house that will drive the value of their house higher from it being more scarce. The winner of the drain regulations is going to be somebody like Starbucks, who wins from they already had it set up that way, so they pushed to get that law passed for everybody to drive out competition. Laws and regulations are not done to benefit the people. They are done to benefit the incumbents or the government or both, which means the answer is deregulation. The answer is to just get rid of these things and let people voluntarily and freely associate with each other. Let exchange happen where two parties want to exchange with each other, and don't arbitrarily stop that. There's an assumption that anytime you have deregulation, you will have collapse, you will have crime, you will have people coming in and doing things that make the system worse. And to a certain extent, you may see an increase in that. But as the idea of anti-fragility goes, this means the system will actually get better over time, because as you have failure allowed, because there's no regulation trying to stop that failure from happening ahead of time, when those things fail, people will learn and do better next time. And anytime you try and prevent those things from happening with laws or regulations, you have second and third order effects that make the whole system worse, and you actually make things more fragile by not allowing people to get stronger through failure. You might say that deregulation is utopian, but as Comic Dave Smith once said, there is nothing more utopian than believing or wanting a limited government. Everybody, both the left, the far left, the right, the far right, wants a limited government. They want the government to be limited to controlling exactly the things they think should be controlled, and then nothing past that. And there is nothing more utopian than believing that if you give a government power, they will do only the things you think they should do and then stop at that. So yes, the answer is deregulation. The answer is more liberty. The answer is more freedom. And you might say, well, that would lead us towards anarchy and a complete dissolution, dissolving the entire government and having no state. And I would say, great, but we're a long way away from that. And let's move a little bit closer in that direction. And if we get too far that direction, we can have another conversation at that time. As always, really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.